a friendly counsel written, impromptu by the author himself, on delivering this book to the printer, according to many deductions made by me during continuous experiments concerning the perception by contemporary people of new impressions from what is heard or read, as well as according to the sense of one saying of popular wisdom, which I have just remembered, and which has come down from ancient times to our very day, formulated thus: every prayer may be heard by the highest forces, and one might get a corresponding reward only if it is uttered thrice. First, for the welfare or the peace of soul of one's parents. Second, for the welfare of one's neighbors. And only the third time, for one's own welfare. I consider it necessary on the first page of this first book, which is quite ready for publication, to give the following advice. Read each of my writings thrice. First time, at least as you have already become mechanized to read all the contemporary books and magazines. Second time, as if you were reading aloud to somebody else. And only the third time, try to grasp the gist of my writings. Only then you may perhaps get your own impartial judgment peculiar to yourself about my writings, and only then could be realized my hope, that you, according to your understanding, would profit for yourself by the benefit which I assume, and I wish you with all my being. Signed author, only now having prepared, in my opinion, by means of everything already set forth in this booklet, a corresponding, so to say, groundwork for depicting before the inner eye of every reader different outlines of the essence of this booklet of mine, called by me the first appeal to contemporary humanity, I consider it right, before other things, to announce in the hearing of all that, although I undertake at last the publication of my writings, I have decided to promote their circulation not by the usual ways, but in accordance with a definite plan worked out by me. This plan, newly formed by me, consists in taking all possible measures to prevent my writings, with the exception of the first series, from becoming at once property accessible to everybody. This decision of mine, made during the last years in the course of my observations of those who listened to the readings of my current work, is the result of long consideration, and is a conclusion contrary to my original hope of the possibility of making some more generally available contribution to the healing of man's psyche, which has already become, during the last centuries, almost completely abnormal. In accordance with my decision, I resolved to make accessible to the public only 3 books from the first series of my writings. With regard to the books of the other 2 series, I intend to make known their contents in the following way. The contents of the second series will be made known by means of readings, open to those who have already a thorough knowledge of the contents of the first series. These readings are intended to take place, in the meantime, in so-called circles already existent among many large groups of men which are made up of the followers of my ideas. For this purpose, these already existing circles, access to which will be made much easier, will be reorganized, and there will be opened clubs of quite a new type, easy of access. And in those places where there are no such circles, there will be sent specially trained people to arrange readings. Acquaintance with the contents of the third series of my writings is permitted only to those people who, besides having a thorough knowledge of the ideas exposed in the 2 previous series, have already begun to manifest themselves and to react to other people's manifestations in strict accordance with my indications set forth in the previous series of my writings. The merit and proficiency of these people will be judged by some of those who have already been admitted to the so-called rights of initiates, according to the code established by me, or, as it might be better expressed, in accordance with the regulations modified by me, which have always existed on earth among people who, in their search for truth, attained a certain definite being. Although I have taken all possible measures for the strict observance of this decision, I do not consider it vain to address a sincere appeal to all readers of my books to help me to the best of their ability in every way to carry out this decision, so that no one interested in my writings should ever attempt to read them in any other than the indicated order. In other words, he should never read anything written by me before he is already well acquainted with the earlier works, even if someone, with a particular motive, should attempt to persuade him to commence the reading other than from the beginning. Believe me, you must take my word for it, that the exact carrying out of this wish of mine can be of great importance to you and your interests, and I therefore particularly stress and insist on it. I shall not now write in detail of the consequences which will result if my request is not carried out. These I have elucidated and verified by my own long observation and statistical calculations. I shall only say here that, for certain people, a reading of my writings in any other than the indicated order no matter if the reader has long been a follower of my ideas or has become one recently, can provoke undesirable phenomena in their general psyche, one of which in particular might paralyze forever the possibility of normal self-perfection. Now, in order to explain the plan of the publication of my writings, I have mentioned the people who have attained the rights of initiates, under whose guarantee others would be allowed to become acquainted with the ideas throwing light upon truth and reality in the third series, and to evoke in the reader's mind even an approximative conception of these people, and incidentally also of those under whose direction the common readings of the second series will take place. And in order to create, in this way, a right attitude towards them, I find it necessary to say this. These two different categories of people, with whose cooperation I intend to make known to a wide public the contents of the second and third series of my writings, represent today the possessors of two quite different degrees of so-called being and comprehension. The preparation for their future activity began as a result of two different circumstances, which happened accidentally and were connected with my activity. The circumstances which contributed to the formation of the first group of these people, who have to prove the worthiness of ordinary people for the right to become acquainted with the contents of the books of the third series of my writings, and who now will be my principal assistants in the new phase of my activity, were the following. At the very beginning, when I had finally decided to organize the Institute on the principles mentioned already in this booklet, and was looking for a suitable country in which to put this into practice, I foresaw certain possible changes in the conditions of ordinary life and decided, therefore, in any eventuality, to confide my intentions to a brotherhood, a kind of monastery existing in the very heart of Asia, with a view to securing in certain ways their future cooperation. As a result of long discussions about all sorts of mutual obligations, which, on my side, were chiefly on the grounds of my future religious and moral actions, and on their side were on the grounds of guiding, in strict accordance with the means indicated by me, the inner world of people whom I would confide to them, we came to a certain definite agreement. And ever since, from 1911, when I arrived in the country which was then called Russian Turkestan, and while moving from one town to another, towards Moscow, and coming into contact with different people answering my purpose while preparing everything necessary for the realization of my intentions, whenever I happened to meet, on the ground of my ideas, such people as had data corresponding to my purpose, which purpose was partly connected with my foreseen need of them in the future, I established relationship with them and, after the necessary mutual agreement, and after supplying them with all needed, I sent them to that monastery. During this entire period, and up to the time of my aforesaid serious motor accident, I traveled throughout the whole of Russia, the Caucasus, Turkey, Germany, and England, to the place where I finally settled. Hospitable France, meeting many tens of thousands of people from almost all the nations of Asia and Europe on the common ground of my ideas, from whom I selected 27 of both sexes, answering in their data to my purpose, and sent them to the aforesaid monastery, with the exception of 3, one of whom was sent back on account of unworthy manifestations, after, of course, being put under a special spell of silence, so that he could not betray what he had seen or heard there, and 2 of whom died, one a victim of an hereditary disease, and the other through an accident which occurred while he was searching for a medical plant. Sant Kishuk, all the others, during the entire period, besides fulfilling all the established requirements of that monastery under the guidance of the elder brothers, and of some of my former assistants, who paid me occasional visits in the search after truth. All of them reached a theoretical cognition in all of its details of the essence of the totality of my ideas, and assimilated it practically in their being, with the aim of their own well-merited objective good in their old age. The circumstances, again very happily prepared in my past for the present, which were the cause of an excellent preparation for people of the second category, with the help of whom, according to my newly elaborated plan, the information about the contents of the second series of my books will be given to a larger public, were derived in this way. When 8 years ago, certain degenerate people, who to the shame of our generation are also called men, committed against me an act which became, so to speak, the apotheosis of their innumerable good deeds, that is, after my serious motor accident, which was known to all who knew me, and when, thanks to various reasons, obviously deriving, according to law, from the objective good deeds of my ancestors and myself, I, contrary to all expectations, did not die, I soon began to liquidate the institute founded by me and everything connected with it. And when, learning later of the hardships of many of the people who had lived for many years at my expense in the main section of the Institute, as well as in other places where I had expected soon to open new sections, I decided to organize for some of them, and their families, a community life in one of the states of Central Europe, where life was relatively cheap and more or less suitable for such a purpose. I organized this community life for those necessitous people, who, while near me, had behaved scrupulously and more or less meritoriously. And I joined with them those whom I had met on my way from Turkestan to Paris, and whom, as they were not yet ready, I regarded only as candidates to be sent later to the aforesaid monastery in Central Asia. Since then, all of them are still living there, and, while fulfilling all kinds of inevitable tasks of ordinary life, continue, on the one hand, to carry out in practice the possibilities they had learnt from me during their stay in the Institute, and on the other, to acquaint themselves thoroughly with all my current work, copies of which are sent to them regularly, as very many of the people whom I met in the last 2 decades would be extremely interested to learn what it was that guided me in determining the worthiness of different people for this aim of mine. And, as at the same time, this knowledge, I believe, might become for some of them an immediate incentive factor, making them assimilate at last. Although merely for their egotistical benefit, some truth they had learnt from me, I consider it appropriate to state openly here that, from the large amount of data which proved the fitness of these people to me, the principal were the following 5. 1. If I established, after all round observation, that they had had in their individuality, since preparatory age, certain definite starting points for a more or less meritorious life in responsible age. 2. If in their being there were not completely atrophied generally inherited predispositions for the developing in the individuality of factors, bringing forth the impulses of organic shame, religiousness, patriarchality, the awareness of one's mortality, etc. 3. If there was a hereditary predisposition enabling the conscious eradication of previously rooted weaknesses in their individuality, due to abnormal surroundings. 4. If they already gave evidence of having had suitable, established conditions of ordinary life, and had the acquired possibility to attain, according to certain principles, some definite perspectives for the future. 5. If there were present a distinct degree of awareness of their own nothingness, and the possibility to attain the necessary quality of desire for transforming themselves from such nothingness into the definite, something, which they ought to be, even according to their own tranquilly meditated understanding. Now, subsequent to the above groundwork, as the master painter would say, I have drawn the general outlines of the very essence of my appeal, and I wish to share with you, and to communicate to you, one of the many definite deductions which I made during my long, impartial observations, in the course of special studies of the automatic and sometimes relatively conscious manifestations of people of the most varying social standing, degrees of innate comprehension, education, race, and belief, that is, definite deductions regarding a most pernicious and undesirable factor, and both in the general and in the subjective sense, and one sharply manifested in man's psychic sphere. For the moment, I shall limit myself to mentioning only general information concerning this psychic factor inherent in everyone, which I have verified and elucidated in every possible way, and which amazed me after appearing to be, at first, relatively insignificant. Later, I shall speak in detail of this factor, as well as of means established by me as a result of my experimental elucidatory methods, which would modify and even destroy completely this undesirable factor with all its consequences. This psychic factor, amazing to me because of its absolute contradiction to the convictions instilled in me since childhood, as well as to the religious and moral conceptions common to all people today, was observed by me, and later, during the 21 years of artificial life mentioned at the beginning of this booklet, was elucidated in all its aspects, thanks to one of my many principles which I infallibly applied to everybody I met without distinction. This principle, one of the several I was constantly carrying out during this period, consisted in that I never considered, and under no circumstances encouraged, in the people I met the impulse created by that factor, inevitably formed in the general individuality of modern man, the manifestations of which are known under the names of vanity and self-conceit, but on the contrary, considered myself obliged to adopt a critical attitude towards them, and risked all prosperity depending upon it. In order to make it clear to all readers and to emphasize its importance, I think it necessary to give the reasons for applying the above-mentioned principle during that period of my life. Long before that period of my life, when I consciously decided, under special oath, for a definite time to manifest myself and react to the manifestations of the people I met in a certain manner, acting for many years. As I have already noted, as professional hypnotist, although I tried as much as possible, while exercising my profession, to keep under the control of my consciousness the undesirable manifestations of my nature. In spite of this, there gradually formed within me, proceeding far beyond the control of my active consciousness, certain automatic influences upon people around me during their waking as well as their hypnotic state. On account of this, there soon began to become really perceptible to my awaking consciousness various consequences, irreconcilable with my nature, of this automatic influence over people, which often evoked in me remorse of conscience. And therefore, in working out the program of my life, which was to be my guiding principle for the future, and of which the fundamental and chief task was that I always, in the course of this predetermined period, in all the inner states of my organism, ought to cultivate, inwardly and manifest towards everyone I met the feelings of love, pity, benevolence, etc., I also decided to include the above-mentioned principle, because its application to life, although mainly to serve my special aim, constituted, in my opinion, at the same time, a part of my inner benevolence towards people. In this way, creating in my consciousness, which had previously acquired a good stability, not without unceasing struggle with the weaknesses inherent in my nature, I maintained almost always in relation to everyone I met without distinction the aforesaid benevolent impulse, helping them, for instance, with useful advice, money, and things essential for life, such as food, letters of recommendation, etc. As a result, however, of all my observations and inquiries, I most definitely established that all these good deeds of mine did not arouse in them recognition of all my kindness, but, on the contrary, formed in all of them a feeling toward me of evident unfriendliness, which was due to the fact that, according to the above-mentioned principle, I did not take into consideration and react to the influence of the variously tinted impulses, which arose in them as a result of the psychic factor common to man today. In all this, the most curious fact, in my opinion, and one capable of rousing in man a great many reflections, is the one established and verified by me in all its aspects, and which appears to be lawful as well, to the effect that if, in relation to any one of those already harboring against me such unfriendliness, when I deliberately increased my inner benevolence, increasing proportionally, of course, at the same time the aforesaid fault-finding, this unfriendliness increased in all cases without exception, and reached a manifest hostility toward me. While speaking about this pernicious factor existing in every psychic state of the modern man, who has been for so many years one of the principal objects of my special observations, I consider it necessary, before stating my final conclusion, to say, first, the following. In the present period of my life, when declining in years, after having had everything to satiety that life can offer to a human being, and having been thereby fully disillusioned in everything, and consequently possessing in the highest degree all data enabling me to be my impartial, I, calling on heaven and earth to witness my sincerity and swearing by the peace of my conscience after death, now, based on the convictions established in my consciousness, proclaim in the hearing of all, the fundamental cause of almost all the misunderstandings arising in the inner world of man, as well as in the process of the communal life of people, is chiefly this psychic factor, which is formed in man's being during the period of preparatory age, exclusively on account of a wrong education, and in the period of responsible age each stimulation, of which gives birth in him to the impulses of vanity and self-conceit. I categorically affirm that the happiness and self-consciousness, which should be in a real man, as well as in a peaceful communal existence between people, leaving aside and not attempting to analyze here the numerous other causes which exist in our lives through no fault of our own, depend in most cases exclusively on the absence in us of the feeling of vanity. My most sincere wish in this case is that every man who strives to justify before great nature his destiny as a man, and not merely as an animal, that destiny which is allotted to him among the other beings on earth, and is such as it ought to be, as I prove logically in the third series of my writings, and affirm without any possible refutation on anybody's part, should see afterwards, in his endeavor to discover the sense of my writings, and in the new institutions I expect to found. First of all, the possibility of finding in them various means of helping him to eradicate from his entirety those data fixed in him, the totality of which gives birth to every variety of the feelings of vanity, and with a view, on the one hand, to characterizing for the preparation, so to speak, of a fertile soil, enabling readers all the better to grasp my subsequent appeals, my perpetual, as it might be called, maniacal striving towards the solution of all as yet obscure theological problems, and on the other hand, in order to make my readers understand more clearly the real significance of the presence in men's inner world of factors, contributing to a conscious or even an automatic cultivation of good impulses towards other people, from which impulses rise all sorts of consequences contradicting the usual conceptions of men. That is, impulses idealized and professed by all religious doctrines which have existed and still exist on earth, as well as by the morality which the ages have forged in man's life. I consider it useful or even necessary to confess here that to have the possibility of explaining to myself in more detail the results of the manifestation in human intercourse of a naked relationship based on love, pity, trust, sympathy, etc., free from all kinds of evil conventions outwardly established in our life, results that before escaped my attention for some reason, from the day I started this my first appeal, up to today, that is, from the 13th of September to the 13th January 1933, on one side began myself to put into practice very insistently, and even with a constant self-derision, that religious philosophical principle known by men for centuries, and according to which our ancestors and even some contemporary people who reached, thanks to their good life, a certain degree of self-consciousness, dedicated a third of each year of their life, depending on which part would least interfere with the obligation of their ordinary life, for self-perfection, or, as they say, for saving their souls. This principle could be formulated in this way: to be patient towards every being and not to attempt by the possibilities in our power to alter the consequences of the evil deeds of our neighbors. On the other side, I provoked and supported the manifestations of the principle through an artificial influence on the psyche of 3 other different persons, and I observed thoroughly all the consequences that resulted from it. The devices of my artificial influence were threefold. The first I influenced by means of almost uninterrupted, kindly intention persuasions and conscientious exhortations. The second I influenced by threats of the terrible future awaiting him, and the third by means of various hypnotic suggestions. During the same period, insofar as my temporary physical depression, the consequence of serious fatigue, permitted, I still further intensified, in relation to all people coming in contact with me, my inner benevolence, but accompanied it by the strict fulfillment of the possibility, set myself as a serious task of always remembering, and, in conversations, deliberately manifesting, under a mask of serious irritation, the device I have practiced since the beginning of my aforesaid 21-year period of artificial life, and which I have summed up in the phrase, to quarrel ruthlessly with all manifestations dictated in people by the evil factor of vanity present in their being. As to the facts I established at that time, I verified in all their aspects all the new facts which derived from that so-called contact of inner worlds, and I shall speak about them in some subsequent appeals I intend to publish. But I should like, in the meantime, with reference to the last of my special observations and verifications, which I conducted, of course, also with a view to preparing for our descendants the factual material for the right inculcation and understanding by them of the real and true meaning of the psyche of their neighbors and fellow men, unfortunate creatures, too, on account of their lack of willpower and of real objective reason, so that they, our descendants, unlike us who, as people of our times, have already become, by reason of the abnormal environment, almost simple and automatically vegetating animals, whereas we should be real godlike creatures capable of entering into and understanding the position of others. To give an approximate explanation in this my first appeal of one original elucidatory experiment, attempted by me during the last months, and to confess yet another and new categorical decision brought forth by the consequences of this very psychological experiment, and to the fulfillment of which decision I intend to proceed immediately upon the completion of all my writings. I should like to speak of this experiment here and even to confess my categorical decision in this matter. In particular, so that there may arise, in the mentation of the many people who have met me on the ground of my ideas, but who still persist in vegetating on earth, and on whom I then wasted much time without benefit for either them or myself, chiefly on account of their criminal laziness, time which did not suffice, as it was, for my very important current affairs on a world scale, some shock of such intensity as to permit the formation in them finally, even if automatically, of some other form of thinking and feeling, more proper to man. I must state, first of all, that when, during these last months, I was working on this first appeal of mine, while simultaneously looking through my first series of writings, which were ready for print, there arose the necessity of elucidating for myself the aforesaid detailed results, eluding ordinary observation, as to the existence in man's inner world of all sorts of altruistic strivings towards other people, therefore, taking into account the resulting situation, namely, that there were almost no people left about me essential for my general experimental elucidations, which was the consequence of the decision I had been applying over a period of years to limit the circle of people seeking to come in contact with me. I had recourse, in order to have at my disposal once again of the necessary body of various types of people, i.e. to have, as is said, a wide field for experiment to the following measure. Having decided long beforehand to mortgage, upon the completion of my writings, my 2 European estates in order that, if upon the completion of my writings, my collateral commercial affairs, as I call them, should happen for some reason, at the moment intended for publication, to be in what is called a process of increasing inertia, which as a matter of fact did happen, I might not be wholly dependent on others, and that I might have the possibility by the help of the money, thus realized, to put on foot the publication and spreading abroad of my writings as I thought fit. I set about the arranging of this mortgage, not as any person more or less familiar with Parisian ways would have done, i.e. by simply entrusting the affair to the nearest lawyer, but with the intention of forming such on experimental field, entrusted the affair rather to a whole series of special offices existing for this purpose, as well as to private, commission agents, and sub-commission agents. Thanks to this, what I think to be my last extravaganza, and with a view to satisfying the same mania, I elucidated for my own benefit, besides convincing myself of the correctness of my strange verification, which absolutely contradicted men's usual conception, that the force and degree of man's inner benevolence evokes a proportionate degree of ill will in others. A multitude of hitherto unsuspected and new, though slight, and yet very significant and explicative facts, and even, it may be said boldly, I became stuffed again with such wealth of purely psychological material that, contrary to my conviction, as well as that of all those who have more or less familiarized themselves with my writings, a conviction that I had nothing more to write about, as I had already written about everything imaginable, it would, perhaps, have sufficed for my new writer's profession for the remainder of my life, assuming, of course, that I desired to continue in it. I was enriched to the maximum with material for writing on a countless number of different themes, capable of composing in their totality an important literary work, more extensive even perhaps than Beelzebub's tales to his grandson, and called this time, for example, Dreams and Fantasies of People in the 20th Century. 2 other sad consequences must be mentioned with reference to my real situation. The first was that I was forced, during that period, to abandon those places in Paris to which I had become accustomed, and to interrupt often in this way the regular tempo of my thoughts, which were devoted to my given task, because, from the day I had recourse to the aforesaid offices and private persons, the expansion of my experimental field began to assume such proportions, as a result apparently of the general crisis, that within 2 or 3 days I was obliged to do so for fear of being, so to speak, finally sucked dry. And the second was in that my extravagant idea cost me in the end a goodly sum of French francs and German marks. I would not have called this second circumstance sad, as it was all in the order of things to bear heavy expenses in the course of my various psychological researches, had it not been that I unexpectedly became that year a victim of the American crisis as well. Recalling now this much talked of American crisis, and though fully cognizant of the fact that very many will reproach me, I shall not disguise, but openly admit, the fact that not only am I personally content, but that I even experience an impulse of satisfaction, and bless this crisis, which has shaken what was, to all appearances, an already stable and prosperous American life. Such an apparently malignant impulse arose in my original individuality and continues to thrive therein, for the present as a result of the fact that only in consequence of its action upon my material position was I afforded the possibility of confirming the correctness of my investigations, and have only now come to the full and absolute conviction, expressed now in all my being and not only, as before in my consciousness, that if, in contradistinction to that documentally verified fact, which persisted in the process of the communal life of people up to the famous Greco-Roman civilization, at the present time in the process of our communal life, all the inner determined impulses of any man have finally ceased to make any impression, and to have of their own accord any reverberation in the inner world of the people around us. This results exclusively from the consequences of the inculcation into the as yet unformed consciousness of the growing generation of various conventions and customs for their artificial manifestation, i.e., as a consequence of their so-called upbringing, which began to assume such distorted forms at the time of the Greco-Roman civilization and to flourish particularly in the period of the Middle Ages. The immediate consequence of this my last extravaganza was that, meeting a multitude of people of every kind of social situation and heredity, living at the present time in that center of communal life for contemporary people which is even termed the capital of the world, and where, consequently, must flow all, so to speak, perfected devices of happy customary existence, and whence all other people ought to take and use these for their good. Among the number of these perfected devices must be counted also, of course, simplified methods for the purposed formation in man's being of corresponding factors for the conscious and automatic manifestation of various aspects of objective morality. I, having outwardly with these people, on the ground of my wish to obtain a comparatively small sum of money against the security of my property worth many millions, various, so to speak, logically sequent busmes relations, and inwardly realizing in practice the aforesaid religious philosophical principle, in pursuance of my special psychological aim, as a result of all this, have fully and clearly, and without any shadow of doubt, established the complete absence in them of all those psychological factors, which, in accordance with many historical data lending themselves to documentary proof, necessarily formed themselves in the entirety of people of past epochs, those psychic factors in particular, which form themselves in people during the period of their preparatory age, partly of their own accord under the influence of their environment, and partly by the deliberate action of wise tutors, during responsible life, mechanically react in such a way upon the usual general psyche, that these people cannot, even in spite of all their mental desire, behave in relation to others otherwise than in accordance with these psychic factors rooted in them since childhood. I refer to those factors which are in the process of forming, even in the present time, entirely automatically, it is true, in the majority of people living on all continents in places more or less isolated from the influence of so-called contemporary culture. It must be added here that these psychic factors may likewise be easily instilled into people living their preparatory age under the conditions of contemporary culture. But to make possible the conservation of these factors unchanged over the whole period of responsible life, it is indispensable, with a view to their fixation, as my experimental elucidations have shown me, to watch over them indefatigably over a period of 1 or 2 years following their coming of age, and shield them from specially potent environing influences by exercising a corresponding influence over them. Of these psychic factors, the one that stands out most in relief, and which becomes at once easily obvious, is the factor that may be called scruple of conscience, and which makes it impossible that its possessor act otherwise than frankly in relation to all those who show him full inner confidence, even if his so-called waking consciousness urge him to act in an opposite manner. Speaking of this factor, inherent in the human psyche, which necessarily formed itself and was present in the whole period of the responsible life of our ancestors, now long departed into eternity, does not prevent my saying also, and even emphasizing with an impulse of great offense, that of the 50 people inhabiting the capital of the world and serving me at that time, without, of course, their being conscious of it, as objects of my observations and elucidations. The functioning and manifestation of this peculiar psychic factor proved among 11 of them to have been completely transformed into the factor called in ancient times potispodny, that is, degeneration, and one which has already gone so far that, on accidental or deliberate excitation of this factor. The manifestation of its action comes about in man by the accomplishment of a diametrically opposite act. I even assured myself of the existence in 2 of these 11 persons, 2 brothers of juridical origin, marked signs of the beginning of that same evil, nothing, which was first noted in man's entirety by the Babylonian sages and physiognomists, and called by them poisnecure, and which, according to the explanation of these sages, has the property of becoming transformed under certain well-known conditions of environment into a source of contagion. I have the intention, I may say, upon the final completion of work on all my writings, to make this nothing, also the object of my investigations, and to try and find means for uprooting forever from people's lives this plague on humanity, and becoming convinced during this time that the principal reason for the absence of these factors, which can be with ease deliberately formed, was to be found chiefly in the absence in the process of our contemporary life, for the education of the growing generation, of those specially trained people who were necessarily to be found in the process of the customary life of our ancestors, and were called spiritual instructors, and whose chief obligation consisted in helping, by direct influence upon the inner world of children in their district, the formation in them of these particular and inevitably requisite for communal life, psychic factors. I, without long reflection, decided that if I were successful, in the first place, in successfully overcoming, by means of my writings, that established and specifically mass psychosis of people, which was already analyzed in all its aspects in ancient times and was called Heller-Tune, and which may also be explained, according to contemporary understanding, as the unusual excitation of minds, and secondly, in organizing without hindrance, and on the intended scale and tempo, the clubs of the new type already mentioned, I would introduce from the beginning, without fail, the idea that one of the principal functions of these clubs should be the rapid organization, everywhere among large groups of people of institutes, the aim of which would be to prepare such spiritual instructors as would fully answer to their calling. Aniline Yen will follow from this particular categorical decision of mine, because into this decision there enters also my supposition that I, for the possibility of realizing my aim, have also the intention of establishing as my first fund such a sum of money as the elucidatory psychological experiment, just explained, has cost me, with the addition of one more naught as interest, and of recovering this sum forcibly, by creating lasting moral suffering in those whose duty at one time it was to make manifest the factors of good, giving rise to scruple of conscience in the entirety of those people who lately dealt with one over the mortgage of my property, that property earned literally by the sweat of my brow, which mortgage was necessary for the benefit of humanity, and I decided to do this with the knowledge and help of their relatives and friends. This will concern, of course, their former and as yet living tutors, for the dead who did not, while alive, perform their obligations, which they voluntarily undertook towards their successors, annihilate themselves, as I demonstrate experimentally, so completely that, after a few days already, there is no means, either by natural physical or by supernatural magical powers, of establishing contact with any of their former parts. And to make possible the realization of all this, I precisely today and in, to me, a very strange coincidence of circumstances, consisting in that I was writing the last lines of this my first appeal a few minutes before the coming of the new year, according to the old style, in that moment in particular when, with the passage of objective time, in one of the processes of change from the old to the new year, it suited just and impartial fate or some other saintly aspect of the blessed cosmic equilibrium to bring about my appearance into the world. Give myself in this, for me, significant moment in the flood of my life, my essential word, to mobilize all my abilities and whatsoever possibilities have accumulated in me in the course of my past life in order to find these people, and to realize in relation to them this very aim I have set myself. Amen. Now, after pronouncing such an often materialized here on earth, biblical and all-concluding word, it only remains for me to proclaim to all who have in any way met me on the ground of my ideas up to the time of my activity as a writer, that, after an 8-year break in all relations with all and sundry, I again eagerly renew them as from today. I renew them in all eagerness, of course, only with those people whose inner world has not yet finally wasted away and fallen under the sway of various representatives of the God of evil. Any personal interview with me is only possible after preliminary correspondence with my secretaries. Wherever I may be, my permanent address still remains as before. Château du Prieuré, Fontainebleau, France. That place in particular, where was located the chief department of the Institute for Man's Harmonious Development, founded by me 11 years ago, and which, I may say, thanks to my keeping in view, from the very beginning of my activity as a writer, that I had in it something indispensable to the aim of fulfilling this present new phase of my activity for the good of my neighbors. And, as a result of this, thanks to the principal aim I had set myself, regardless of my physical state after the catastrophe, of preserving this chateau, and everything it was comprised of and contained, intact in spite of very considerable difficulties of a material as well as of another nature, remains at the present time not only intact and as well preserved as it was on the day of my misfortune, but may serve with entire satisfaction, because of the multitude of new constructions and improvements, for all that I may now undertake. Gurdjieff.